long hiatus to Comic Trades Monthly. I'm one of your hosts, David.
And I'm Dane.
Welcome back. And this month we are reading Avengers Versus X-Men. So why did we choose this one this month, Dane?
I was delving into what we should choose because you asked, you said, do I have any ideas? And the idea popped into my head of the Fox-Disney merger. And I thought to myself, AVX is the perfect analogy for that because Avengers, of course, is owned by Marvel. And then the rights for filming to Fox are all of the X-Men's, Deadpool, Fantastic Four. So I thought this would be just kind of a perfect toe dip to get into that.
And there's so much more, there's so many nuanced things that people don't realize that the MCU can't have. Right. For instance, the latest Ant-Man and Wasp, the term microverse, which is something that they commonly go into in the Ant-Man comics, the Pym particles take them there and whatnot. Microverse has been trademarked by Fox, so they can't use it. Same with mutant.
Right.
Marvel can't use the term mutant in any of their movies yet. Which
is why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had to use the term Inhumans as an analogy for mutants, which always rubbed me the wrong way because Inhumans are completely different from mutants.
Yeah.
They were tested on by the Kree, and they went to the moon to basically seclude themselves from any discrimination.
Yeah.
Whereas the mutants really didn't have that. The mutants, Professor X in the 60s comics states that mutants occurred because of radiation, because of nuclear testing.
Yeah.
Which, it was Stan Lee coming out basically saying, okay, we do need to fear all of the consequences of what we're doing. And it eventually evolved into racism and stereotypes where Avengers are, of course, the humans of the group. Not a lot of them are actually mutants until very recently. And the X-Men are solely mutants in one way, shape, or form. I mean, they've got mutant aliens, they've got mutant sentience.
Mutant islands.
Right. Yeah. They're nothing more than mutants.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why it just bugs me is because the Kree came in and tested on humans.
Yeah.
Mutants weren't really tested on by anybody. It was just...
They are a fact of nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, diving into Avengers vs. X-Men, let's talk about who wrote for Avengers vs. X-Men. And the better question is, who didn't work on this, right?
Exactly.
You have Jason Aaron, Brian Michael Bendis, Ed Brubaker, Jonathan Hickman, and Matt Fraction.
Right.
These are huge names. Brian Michael Bendis, as we know now, is with DC, doing Superman. Jason Aaron did all of the Jane Foster Thor story arc, which was fantastic. Ed Brubaker, Jonathan Hickman, Matt Fraction, all of these people they've got such a roster to their names.
Right. Ed Brubaker actually wrote my favorite storyline of Captain America. That was the Winter Soldier storyline.
Oh, yeah.
And then Matt Fraction, of course, wrote two of my favorite lesser viewed Avengers, and that was Immortal Iron Fist and Hawkeye.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't believe I completely forgot about the Hawkeye arc.
Right.
The 4-part. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he writes the Hawkeye arc, and he also started writing the Hawkeye arc where it's Hawkeye's everyday life outside of the Avengers. Him and Kate Bishop and his one-eyed dog Lucky.
Oh, that's such a good... Oh, my gosh. If you haven't read that one, you guys, that's a high-quality one to listen to, or to read.
It really is, because it goes to show that, superheroes have an everyday life too, but with it being Marvel, with it being a comic, of course, things don't always go to plan.
Yeah. Not cool, bro.
No.
All right. So Avengers vs. X-Men, there's a little bit of a preamble to it. The Avengers X Sanction or Avengers Sanction, whichever one it is, where Cable comes back in time. The son of Cyclops, comes back in time and he learns something of the future and he goes, I have to kill the Avengers. And he gets stopped and he gets cured of the technovirus. Right. By his daughter, Hope Summers. let's talk about Hope Summers for a second, because she's a pivotal character in this.
She is.
What do we know about her background?
So this actually ties back into House of M with Scarlet Witch.
Okay, yeah, we got to go further back. I forgot about that.
Because during House of M, of course, Scarlet Witch uses her abilities to alter all of reality, where Homo sapiens are now the inferior species, whereas the dominant species are Homo superior mutants. There are a few characters who, of course, aren't Homo superior, but are still in the spotlight. For example, Spider-Man is a movie star. And then at the end of all of this, she's been shown that what she's doing is wrong. What she's doing isn't natural. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
If Homo superior is to take over, they need to take over naturally. And she changes everything back. But after she changes everything back, she utters 3 more words. No more mutants. And the population of the mutant society goes from millions down to 198, less than 200. So Hope Summers is the first mutant born since the Day of M, which is the day that everything changed back.
Yeah.
So all of the mutants see her as the mutant messiah because she's the only one that's been born since then. And that's where she comes into the story, is she is actually kidnapped by Cable, taken into the future, raised until she's 16, and then brought back to the past. Because he thinks that she's not ready to be the mutant messiah.
Yeah.
If she is a little bit older, then she'll be ready.
Yeah.
So that's where Hope comes back in. She comes in to save the mutant race.
And her powers are like, they're mimicking, essentially. If she's in proximity to another mutant, she can copy those powers.
Right. She's like the early 60s comic book character Mimic from X-Men, where he got all of these abilities because he was around the other X-Men. He had Beast's physique, he had Cyclops' laser vision.
Angel's wings.
And then he had a slight telepathy from Marvel Girl. It wasn't anywhere near as powerful. None of his abilities were. But Hope's ability is interesting because she gains the full ability, not just an approximation of the ability.
Yeah. So Hope is this messiah, and she cures the technovirus by tapping into the Phoenix Force, which is on its way. And we all know the Phoenix Force is the dangerous but powerfully creative cosmic entity that creates and destroys. It is the fire of life kind of thing. And this sets off all sorts of alarms for the Avengers, and they recognize, oh crap, the Phoenix is coming back. Right? So we've got Cable trying to kill the Avengers. He doesn't really explain anything, but we see the Phoenix Force come back. We also know that Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, she's kind of exiled herself because of what she did in the House of M, in the Day of M. And she, this starts out with Avengers X-Zero. Hope is this really violent person. She says, I didn't know he had cybernetics until I cut them off. Like, she stopped a bank robbery with the Serpent Society.
Yes.
And the thing that you see is she's got a knife with her, and it's all bloodied, it's all nasty, and she's just almost killing these people.
Right.
Meanwhile, Wanda is trying to stop some bad guy, some members of AIM.
MODOK specifically, and stops them with ease. And Miss Marvel, not to be confused with Kamala Khan, but Carol Danvers, because she's not Captain Marvel yet. Right.
And Spider-Woman come in and like, hey, come back with us, come hang out. And she goes, okay, yeah, I think I might. And goes to the Avengers Mansion and is met by Vision, her ex-husband, and says, you're not welcome here. You can leave. Which
is the most heartbreaking part, because you actually see Vision is angry about what has happened, about what Wanda has done, but he's turning away the love of his life. I mean, everybody says that Vision has no soul, he has no heart, but when he turns away and walks into the building, you see him crying.
Yeah.
An android crying. That's just like, that's heart-wrenching to see.
If you've ever been in a toxic relationship and you're head over heels over this person, it is so gut-wrenching to leave. But this is exactly what Vision is doing, is he's leaving someone who has abused him in every sense of the word, right? So it's really just kind of just gut-wrenching to see, and really empowering for Vision as well. It brings so much of a human aspect and quality to this character. The next thing that we see is in Avengers 1, Nova flies in, crashes to Earth, lands through a building, and in Avengers Versus X-Men 0, it kind of touches on this a little bit. He tries to avoid as much damage as he can, and he's feeling really bad about like what damage he is going to cause because he can't land safely. And the only thing that he can tell them is that the Phoenix is coming.
And he doesn't even say that. He just says it's coming.
Yeah.
And they try to get it out of him. They try to say, hey, what's coming? What's coming? And he just keeps saying it's coming, and then goes into a coma.
Yeah. So they discern everything that's going on. The Avengers are talking to some political seating in the White House saying, hey, this is going to be coming up. Meanwhile, Cyclops is training with Hope, trying to make sure that she's ready. Cyclops kind of already knows that the Phoenix is coming back for her, but they're not sure as of when. So he's training her really hard. And like, the way that he talks is he sounds like an evangelical preacher of some sort waiting for Jesus. You know, like the Phoenix is their Messiah.
He's waiting for the second coming.
Exactly. And Hope is just the vessel of the Messiah. So like, he just wants to make sure that she's going to be stronger than Jean Grey ever was. Never mind that several different other people have held the Phoenix during this time.
Right.
But I really liked how it starts out. You know, you've got these two different parties, and it makes it very clear what their motivations are when they find out the Phoenix is coming. One, for the X-Men, we've got to train Hope because she's going to be the vessel, and we need to make sure that she's going to be able to reignite the mutant gene in humanity. That is the clear and cut goal of Scott Summers.
Right.
However, the Avengers are very much worried, like, hey, we saw what happened last time. The Dark Phoenix arised. We need to make sure that Hope is going to be safe, so that way we can try and prevent this from happening.
And I actually thought this part was most interesting, is where Captain America goes to Utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And starts to speak to Cyclops. And the first thing that Cyclops actually says to Captain America is, you were never there for the mutants, so why are you here now?
Mm-hmm. And that brings me back to Civil War, which there's this great scene where I think it's Carol Danvers is talking to Emma Frost. And Emma Frost just lays into Carol about how, like, this thing happened to us. Where were you guys? We had to handle that on our own. This thing happened. Where were you guys? Oh, we had to handle that on our own as well. So, and just like names off this long list of things that like, we don't want your help because you're only willing to give it for a PR movement.
Right.
And that's how this entire, like, I even wrote that down, same thing of like, in one of the offshoots in New Avengers 24, Red Hulk says, but we're talking about stopping the end of days. And yes, for some of us, this means we're going to be fighting friends. And it's like, but are they really friends? In most of the sense of the word, they're just more acquaintances, right?
Right. I mean, the only person who has any sort of ties to the X-Men in the Avengers at that point, actually there's two, are Wolverine and Beast.
Mm-hmm.
And
Storm.
And Storm,
yeah.
Correct. But Wolverine and Beast are part of the Jean Grey Institute of Higher Learning.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got Storm with Cyclops over in the Xavier Institute in Utopia. So at this point in time, the ties with the X-Men altogether with Wolverine are tenuous at best.
Yeah.
And this goes back to Schism.
Oh, yeah.
Which I still have to thank you for getting me that.
Yeah, happy birthday.
And I loved that one because it actually showed just how deeply segmented the X-Men actually are.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to the 90s with X-Men Team Gold and Team Blue.
Mm-hmm.
They had two separate storylines that didn't really intersect all that well together.
Mm-hmm.
And then Schism better explained that. I mean, they're two completely separate ideological systems.
Yeah, Wolverine wants to make sure that these children grow up. He's seen enough children die, and Cyclops wants to prepare them for the inevitable fight that they're going to have to live against humanity every single day, right? So be prepared, or let children be children with powers.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to kind of come across. Like, which side would you really want to be on? Do you prepare your children for the future, or do you try and give them that gradual induction to society on top of allowing them just to be kids?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing just breaks down into race.
Yeah.
I mean, Wolverine is pretty much just saying, you know what, we're just going to keep to our own and we should be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Cyclops is saying, well, every time we've tried to keep to our own, something bad happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
We had the mutant registration, we had House of M. So all of these bad things are coming, so why not prepare for these bad things?
Exactly.
And then Wolverine just says, you know what, just because bad things happen doesn't mean that kids can't be kids.
Yeah. And I think on that, I kind of sided with Wolverine in Schism. But before we get any further, Avengers Versus X-Men, knowing where these lie, and try not to think about what's going to happen in the comics that we'll talk about in a minute, but with the idea the Phoenix can bring back the X-Men or bring back mutants, or the Phoenix can destroy Earth. Like, are you pro-Avengers or are you pro-X-Men at this point?
I'm pro-Avengers at that point, due to the fact that I had that Spock mentality of what's best for one isn't always best for the many or the few.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there are only 198 mutants left.
Mm-hmm.
199 if you include Hope.
Yeah.
But what's good for them isn't necessarily going to be what's good for the rest of the world, if not the rest of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Phoenix Force is a cosmic force.
Yeah.
It moves from planet to planet, which you see at the beginning of round 1.
Yeah.
You see the Phoenix just blowing through planets, destroying things to try and get to its destination.
Yeah.
When it gets here, who's to say it's not going to change its mind as to what it wants to actually do?
And I'm going to be honest, I was pro X-Men. I was very much like, you are a dying race. What do we as humans do to an endangered species? We bring them into captivity, we make sure they're mating, we make sure that they're taken care of, and then that way they can reestablish their numbers, right? Why not try every little thing that you can? Now, I think trying to take the Phoenix Force is going to be, that's literally playing with fire, but I think that Scott's mindset is in the right direction. So when I started this, I was definitely pro X-Men. And I remember I went to like the X-Men, like there were different shops here in Salt Lake that was like, one was selling the Avengers variant editions and one was selling the X-Men one. And I went to my shop, just like, it's my shop, this is where I normally go. And like, he goes, oh yeah, we're pro Avengers. I was like, son of a bitch, damn it.
You're like, and I just changed shops.
Yeah. Sorry, Black Cat Comics. Gotta go to Dr. Volt's now. But like, I was like, all right, cool. Like, they're just comics, right? Like, I'll buy them regardless.
Right.
So let's jump into issue number, round 2. Everyone's fighting. Captain America goes to Cyclops. Cyclops says, I'm not going to go give up Hope. Captain Cap says, we need her in custody. We want her protected. And I tried reading some of the offshoot stuff before I realized that there were like 60 of them. So I read a little bit of the Uncanny X-Men number 11. And at the end of that issue, Cyclops says, okay, let's send out a PR piece. And a reporter who works for the X-Men constantly, they writes this piece, and basically Avengers want Hope in protective custody, and X-Men state, quote, if someone wanted to take your family away with you without justification or permission, what do you call that? It sounds like kidnapping. And that rang really true to 2018.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the entire time I was reading this, I was like, okay, so this came out in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And with the whole political system being as hard segmented as it is, where you're either left or right, and if you are somewhere in the middle, you're completely disregarded.
Yeah.
It just really started hitting home. Every issue got deeper and deeper into this 2018 political system 5 years before it even came about.
Yeah, and we're not trying to get too political here, but it's mirroring very well what's happening in our day, right? Like,
exactly.
It's just not to make a pun, but uncanny of how this reflected so beautifully in our society.
And that's what I think actually makes a good comic
Mm-hmm.
is when even years down the road, it still has that grounding in reality where no matter what situation it is, you can connect it to reality.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's why we do these things. Like, this is why we sit down and we read them. So that way we can figure out what does it mean to us today, right?
Right.
So moving on into the fight, Avengers are fighting X-Men. There's some really great scenes with Colossus leaning into the Sidorak chains, or the binds of Sidorak, because he's now the new Juggernaut Colossus creature, fighting the Red Hulk. Great fight scene. Namor is like, I'm behind Cyclops because he's a man fighting for his kingdom that's dying. And like, there's some really great one-on-one scenes. And if you guys get the chance, I'd highly recommend reading the AVX fights.
The verses.
Thank you. Because there's just some really fun stuff. Like the first one's Magneto versus Iron Man. So how do you fight the master of iron and magnetism to the billionaire playboy genius who has an iron suit?
Exactly. And I love that because this fight, Iron Man, yes, does fight Magneto, but before he actually gets into the fight with Magneto, he gets into a fight with Emma Frost.
Mm-hmm.
And he releases this cloud. And as I'm sitting there reading it, I was like, wow, Iron Man really is like Adam West Batman for Marvel.
He really is. He's got everything.
Always has the answer to everything, because that cloud turns out to be microscopic telepathic tasers.
Yeah.
Every time Emma starts thinking harder, it shocks her harder.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, man. And then you get into Versus and you find out his suit isn't made of metal.
It's nanotubes.
Yeah, it's polymer nanotubes. And you're like, okay, so he really is the Adam West of Marvel.
And like there's just some really great moments where Iron Man shoots out some like magnetic discs to try and like hit Magneto with, and like Magneto sits there and thinks for a moment, and he goes, I feel like there are 2 million of these things. And it's like, AVX fun fact, Magneto has magnetic counting powers.
And those AVX fun facts, they're written almost like a tweet.
Yeah.
Where they don't care about punctuation. They don't care about grammar. They just throw in these random fun facts. Like there's the fight with Namor and the Thing.
Uh-huh.
And they say that Namor's punch feels like being hit at 40 miles per hour by a car. And then it says the Thing's punch feels like being hit by a car at 52 miles per hour.
Yeah, it's just fun. Like, and they really don't change much in the story. They don't add a whole lot to the story, but they kind of cut the tension a little bit if you were reading along as these fights progressed. So we've got all these X-Men fighting the Avengers. No matter where you're standing, there's blood, there's chaos. And then Wolverine takes Spider-Man with him, and they sneak into Utopia, and they find Hope. And Hope was like, I'm going to do this on my own, and so she actually beats up her own friends, and Wolverine finds her there, kind of leaning into the Phoenix Force, and she burns him alive.
And it's not nice.
Yeah.
I mean, she burns him and doesn't even check to see if he's still alive before she takes off.
Yeah, literally running on water away.
And if you look at that panel, she not only sets fire to Wolverine and burns him to a crisp, but you can see that Spider-Man himself is on fire as well.
Yeah.
So she is tapping into the Phoenix Force, but she has no restraint with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which at that point I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where like I say, I was sided with the Avengers. I saw her pushing this further and further, and I'm going, I don't know if a 16-year-old girl would be a good host.
Yeah.
But there was one part in the beginning of round 2 that I really did appreciate, and that was Iron Man acknowledging his choices during the Civil War.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
When he actually looks at Cap and says, it wasn't too long ago I was saying things like that, and you were on the other side.
Oh, yeah. And that one for Tony to have like introspection like that. It's so rare in this character.
Exactly.
Oh, that was heavy stuff. I remember I read that first, and I was like, that's bringing up a lot of like guilt and shame feelings that everyone's going to still carry with them.
Right, because the Civil War was one of those situations where, yeah, you picked sides, but at the same time, no side was entirely right.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have come to a middle grounds, and instead they just stuck to their guns and literally beat each other to a pulp.
And like, this is essentially just another Civil War, just with two different groups. So that's where round 2 ends. Wolverine burning, Utopia under attack, Hope running away. It starts out with all of the Avengers kind of like the X-Men surrender, and Wolverine wakes up and he's trying to figure out what's been going on. And like, there's just too many characters to really mention all of them and like their individual little story arcs.
Right. I actually had a note at this point, and I noted that this is actually the most diverse lineup for both teams since the 90s.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And in the 90s, they just kept throwing out characters, and not a lot of them stuck. I mean, X-Men, let's be honest, Maggot, where is he?
Who?
Exactly. Nobody remembers Maggot except for those few people that are like, he was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then you've got the Avengers, and they have essentially what boils down to the new Avengers from Brian Michael Bendis' initial run, plus a few others that they've thrown in. And it was just interesting to see how diverse of a cast these writers and artists actually were able to throw in.
Oh, yeah, totally. So Wolverine wakes up, realizes that the people from Utopia have surrendered, and he's like, that's not right. Finds out that Magic, which is like one of the coolest X-Men in this decade, like no question. She pretends to be Doctor Strange and then move them like, just like, all right, we're going to teleport away real quick, and then moves all of the X-Men, or at least the major Magneto, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magic, Cyclops, and Namor, somewhere else. And Wolverine's like, I smelled them. You wouldn't let me stop them. Oh, no. Meanwhile, Hope is trying to hide her mental signal from all of the major psychic ones, and so all of the psychic X-Men are like, it's possible that she's in these 5 different locations. So Captain America gets up a squad of teams, and all right, you guys are gonna go. Let's see, where all did they go? They went to. So Iron Man was working on countermeasures, and they went to the Wundagore Mountains, they went to Tabula Rasa, they went to Wakanda, Latveria, and the Savage Lands, and that's where they all thought Hope could be. And Captain America calls up Wolverine and says, you're with me on this mission. He goes, I have no problem with that. And Captain America pulls Wolverine inside and goes, you went rogue there. You're willing to kill a child over this. And Wolverine says, I'm the only person who really remembers how it ended last time.
And I'm also the only person who last time was willing to do what I was set out to do. And I thought that was just, it shows that Wolverine really is older than we all seem to think he is. We all seem to forget that he was actually born in the 1800s. So he's seen a lot of time. He's seen the swing of the pendulum go back and forth. Yeah. And he's the one that's like, okay, guys, this is dangerous. We really need to stop it. At that point, I did start to lean more towards the X-Men, because I was like, Wolverine, you're being such a hypocrite, because you keep telling Cyclops, we need to let these kids be kids. Yeah. Except for this one. This one I need to kill. Yeah. It was just too hypocritical for me.
Fair enough. See, and I always felt like the balance act that Wolverine has to play here. He's an X-Man first, but then he's an Avenger, but he's also an X-Man. So, like, everybody's giving him pot shots during their fight in round 2. Like, you're a traitor, you shouldn't be here, stuff like that. You gotta wonder, like, where is he directing his energy? Is he focusing on saving human race, the mutant kind, just save his school? Where is he leaning here? And there's a moment where Cap says, I won't let you just kill that girl. And Wolverine says, then we'll all die. Very clearly, just cut and dry. Like, if we don't do it my way, it's done. There's no coming back from that. And this is a man who, like you said, who's been through the entire world multiple times, seen death every moment that he's caused it. I think this man knows the cost of life, right. And he's willing to bear it again.
There's a saying, I don't remember who said it, but it was those who actually know the true cost of a life are those who have taken it. And Wolverine, of course, has killed a lot of people. I mean, he's killed countless amounts of people. And he really is the only one that's saying, okay, so this is what's going to be best for everybody. Because if the Phoenix Force comes, yeah, there's a great chance that it will destroy everything. But there is also a small chance that the mutants will wind up being reborn.
Yeah.
But we can't take that chance because I've seen its destructive capabilities. It killed the woman I loved.
Yeah.
Granted, that woman that he loved also happened to be the wife of Cyclops, which you can see the tension there.
Polyamory was not big in the 60s, or what was this, the 80s when this happened? The original. So polyamory, hippies were kind of dying down a little bit in the 80s. Maybe we'll come back around to that in another 10 years or 20 years or so. So Captain America, he says you can't be on this team if you're going to have this mentality, literally kicks them out of the Quinjet that they're in the middle of the Antarctic and just leaves them there. And that's just like, he's your core player, Cap.
Exactly.
He's your core player.
And I love what happens when Wolverine stands up and he's in the middle of this snow in the Antarctic and he just says, well, I guess I'll have to do it myself.
Yeah. Just... He now has become his own team. He's no longer Avengers. He's no longer X-Men. He is pro-Earth.
Exactly.
Right? And that's how he sees it in his mind. This is not a civil war. This is life and death.
Right. And, this is the point where at the beginning of each issue, you see clear-cut lines as to who is on what side. But in this upcoming issue, round 4, as soon as you open it up, you see Wolverine, and he is exactly in the middle.
Yep.
I mean, he's no one team. He's fighting for everything.
Yeah. At this point, we've got multiple teams in round 4. We've got an away team in space, literally trying to fight the Phoenix. You've got Thor, Valkyrie, Vision, Hank McCoy, the Beast, so on and so forth. All these different people. Then you've got the Hellfire Safe House Club with our Uncanny X-Men team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Magneto, so on and so forth. And it all comes down to like who's where, who's fighting who. And that's really kind of how round 4 feels. Emma Frost is going through psychic minds, using Toad at the Jean Grey Institute of Higher Learning, going to Cerebra, putting on the helmet, and she's using him as a conduit, and is like checking in on how are all the fights. And that's kind of what we get for the most part of 4, except for Hope finds Wolverine and says, listen to me, and I'll give you beer.
That was actually my favorite part. I mean, you see this panel, and it's just nothing but the tundra, and then all of a sudden you see this polar bear, and it's getting closer, and as it gets closer, come to find out, Wolverine has actually killed and skinned this bear, and he finds this lone can of beer in the middle of the tundra, and he picks it up, and he's like, thank God, and cracks it open and takes a swig, and he looks down, and he sees a path of beers literally leading to this Quinjet that Hope is in. And when she comes to him and says, okay, I have a plan, and I will give you beer, and it's not frozen. And he says, okay, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's good to know, like, what drives a man. What really drives him.
Exactly.
But you gotta wonder, like, is Wolverine an IPA kind of man? Is he a lager? Like, does he prefer the hipster beers?
Reading the older comics, come to find out he's a Budweiser man.
Product placement at its finest.
Exactly. And, I also at this point thought to myself, how much more time could she have bought if she would have brought cigars too?
Oh my gosh. I have this nice Romeo Julieta cigar. It's your favorite. Here you go. Oh, I have 20 minutes now. Okay, I could take my time.
Exactly. You know what? Here's a PowerPoint presentation.
So what's Hope's plan here? She's got Wolverine. What is she propose to Wolverine at this point?
She flat out tells him, okay, give me a chance to become the host of the Phoenix. And if I'm pushing it too far, I leave it up to you. Kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Just flat out. She just tells him, if you think I am pushing it too far, kill me.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't leave it up to herself. She doesn't leave it up to Cyclops. She doesn't leave it up to Captain America. She leaves it up to the one person that she knows can make that decision.
Yeah.
And that just goes back into why she really is the mutant messiah. She's giving Wolverine the choice to perform this act.
Yeah. And she's wise enough. She's learned enough from Cable. She's learned enough from Cyclops who she needs to be in this moment. If she can't be the person that she wants to be, she wants to be able to be that conduit for the Phoenix. If she can bring about the Wolverine, the mutant regeneration, if you will. If she can, she wants to be, but she knows that the Phoenix comes at a cost. So this is a very wise moment for Hope here.
And at this point, actually, this is where I started to think, okay, the Phoenix Force is a force of destruction and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple times, Cyclops says that there has to be destruction before the rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I was thinking, what is Cyclops thinking that the Phoenix Force is going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because there has to be that initial destruction for the rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen? Cyclops doesn't know. He just knows that there's going to be a rebirth.
Yeah. But at what cost?
Yeah, something has to be destroyed for that.
Totally. So Wolverine takes Hope to an AIM base because AIM they're everywhere and you might as well use their tech. And they get a rocket to go into space and Wolverine, here you go. And Hope says, whoa, I did say, let's get bigger, didn't I? Hey, a redhead girl says she wants to go to the moon. I gotta take her.
Which was just so flat out creepy.
Oh, it's so creepy. She's 16.
She's 16 and he's almost 300 years old at this point in time. He was born in the early 1800s. This is 2013. And he's making sexual jokes to a 16-year-old. I'm like, okay, Roy Moore.
Oh. And I can appreciate the character, he's got a thing for redheads. She's 16!
Right? It's just like, Wolverine, you know what? I know you have a healing factor. We know you have a libido, but turn it down. We know that you're the feral guy. But, pardon my French, but Jesus Christ, man!
Meanwhile, the Avengers find out that she's going to go to the moon because Wolverine turns her in. Iron Man is working on the Phoenix Killer, another suit that he's going to try and pilot to kill the Phoenix. And
another suit that he's Adam Westing.
Yes, again, Adam West. I've got my bat spray and my Phoenix spray in this belt.
I don't have the shark repellent. Hopefully there are no space sharks.
So they get to the moon. The Avengers are there. Hope's upset. You broke our deals. Like, hey, you just wanted me to take you to the moon. I got you to the moon. The X-Men show up because, of course, Emma Frost was reading their minds, and they're on the moon. They have another fight, and Thor shows up, battered and bloodied and broken because he's been fighting the Phoenix for as long as he could, and it was fruitless, to say the least. And that's kind of where that one ends. It's just the Phoenix is at the moon. They're all on the moon. We should clarify they're on the blue
the blue area of the moon.
The blue area of the moon with artificial air and everything. And
right. Again, it was a Kree area. It's where the Inhumans initially were.
Yeah, until they moved to Earth, and that's a whole other thing.
It was actually at this point, though, that I kind of tied back to the original idea as to why we started reading this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to see Captain America versus Cyclops on the screen, or Captain America versus Wolverine.
Oh, fuck yes. That last one specifically. Wolverine, you could do a retcon. depending on however Infinity War is going to end. But like, you have Wolverine fighting side by side in the comics with Cap in World War II.
Right.
Let's have some cool retconning moments where it's like, oh yeah, I fought with this guy named James Howlett. He was a beast on the battlefield. And
exactly.
Like, you know.
And they did that in the 90s, where they had this storyline of Captain America and Black Widow coming to Wolverine and saying, hey, you remember those missions that we did back in World War II and back in the Cold War area? So yeah, we need your help finishing one of those missions, which I think would be so cool because Wolverine has that huge background with both Captain America and Black Widow.
Yeah.
So watching them on the screen would just be like an ultimate fanboy moment.
Oh, totally. So like if we got Civil War and that was like one of those Harrison Ford, Jack Reacher movies, we could have so many good movies with Cap, Black Widow, Nick Fury, and Wolverine.
Exactly.
Just give me that 4 and I will eat whatever you hand me.
Exactly.
So round 5 starts out, they're on the moon. Surprise, surprise, they're fighting again.
Exactly. It's always going to happen. It's going to happen over and over.
And we're in Hope's mind this time because she's the narrator at this point, and she brings up Colonel Thomas Farabee, the man who pushed the button that dropped the atomic bomb in Japan.
Which, you know, that was just one of those things that, yeah, you never actually know the name of the guy who pushes the button. You just happen to know the name of the bomb or the name of the city or the name of the plane, but you don't know who pushed the button until you start to scrutinize it.
Yeah. And she brings up the fact that no one ever says Colonel Thomas killed 150,000 people. They blame the bomb. So in this instance, she's questioning herself. Is she the bomb? Or is she the person to push the button that is the Phoenix, that is the bomb? And that's such a great moment in her character arc where she's starting to understand how truly powerful the Phoenix Force really... Oh my gosh, it's not something you can handle, Scott!
Exactly. I mean, going back to round 2, where she's training... round 1, sorry. Where she's training with Cyclops. And Cyclops tells her, no use of your abilities.
Yeah.
And so... they start fighting, and Cyclops blasts her. She says, I thought you said don't use abilities. And Cyclops says, well, nobody's ever going to fight fair. And he keeps pushing her, and she has that minute burst of the Phoenix Force. And it's enough to blast him across their training area.
Yeah.
The same thing happens on the moon, where she's getting pushed, and she taps into just a minute piece of the Phoenix Force, and it scares her.
So she chickens out. She tries to get Wolverine to kill her. And Cyclops, of course, being the dick that he is, at this point in the comics, I'm gonna be honest, I was like, I'm more Team Wolverine at this point. I feel like Wolverine's the only one with a good head on his shoulders right now. Yes, if she says she can't handle it, trust her. She is complaining about the entire time that no one is trusting her. This is the moment you trust her. And Cyclops refuses to do so. So, the Phoenix is coming down. Iron Man jumps in his God Killer and goes up into the air and tries to kill the Phoenix Force. And what happens next? Coolest fucking shit on the face of comics.
And it was something I did not expect coming when I was reading through this the first time.
I didn't either. I honestly, I had no idea what was going to happen at this point. And he goes in, the Phoenix is in range, firing disruptors, and you just see white and you see yellow, and the Phoenix Force is screaming, and there's a little monologue with Hope's internal narration. I spent my life waiting for the exact moment, this singular moment, running from it, towards it, fearing it, waiting for it every second, every hour, every day. The thing was when it finally arrived, I just didn't want it. And as it turned out, it didn't want me either. And a little bit of everybody's kind of coming back to, Avengers sound off, who's alive. And then the next panel, you see the Phoenix motherfucking 5. I never knew I wanted this in my life.
I didn't either.
But this was so fucking cool.
And, the coolest thing I thought was just the costumes.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like Cyclops, just looks so incredibly badass as Phoenix Cyclops.
And he's gone through shit costumes for the past 20 years. He has not had a cool costume since the 90s.
Right, since the Jim Lee.
Exactly. So now he's got this cool black and red and gold theme going on.
And it feels very reminiscent of Dark Phoenix.
It does. It does. So the Phoenix Five, you've got Namor, Emma Frost, Cyclops, Colossus, and Magic. And they have the Phoenix Force split 1/5 in each of them. And they speak in these scary voices. They are covered in fire constantly. And it is just the coolest looking thing I have seen in comics since Captain America picked up the hammer, Mjolnir, in Fear Itself story arc. I had not been just so blown away in a comic book in years. The costumes alone, I'm back to being pro X-Men because, man, they got it.
Exactly. And, you know, being pro Avengers since the start, as soon as I saw the Phoenix Five, I was like, well, you know, the Avengers don't look quite as cool anymore. I mean, granted, I like Immortal Iron Fist's white suit, but that's really the only big change on any of them in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
But the new X-Men, oh my gosh. And you've got Emma Frost, who's in all gold, and she's back to almost like that Hellfire mistress suit. And then Colossus, he's no longer the Juggernaut.
He no longer has the bands of Sidorak on him. He no longer has the bands on him. So, like, clearly, he's way more powerful, which I'm glad that you brought that up because during the Fear Itself story arc, the Juggernaut picks up one of the hammers of the serpent, right?
Yes.
So he becomes this other being, and Magic and Colossus go to Sidorak, and they say, "Hey, this is your boy Juggernaut here. He's using your power, but he's serving another god. How do you feel about that?" He goes, "I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take my power away from him, but it has to go to somebody."
He basically says, "I only allow worship of one god."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he says the power has to go somewhere. And you have Colossus, who, you know, big-hearted, selfless guy that he is, realizes that one of the only ways he can stop the wielders of the hammers is if he has more power.
Mm-hmm.
And his sister comes to him and says, "Hey, you know, I went to Limbo. I have all of these abilities besides my mutant abilities now because I was willing to give up a little bit of my soul."
Yeah.
So Colossus does give up the figurative little bit of his soul and becomes Juggernaut Colossus.
Yeah. And he never comes out of steel form because he's afraid that it will lean too much into the Sidorak power. So he's always wearing the bands. He's always in steel form, but he no longer has the bands. The bands are now gone. And I don't think we ever see them back on him after this point. That's a little bit terrifying to me. Because what is Sidorak going to do in the future as recompense?
Exactly.
Right? So it comes, issue, what are we on? Round 5? We're on round 6.
Yes, round 6.
Starts out 10 days after the Phoenix Five. Which I don't think they're ever called the Phoenix Five, but it just sounds cool in my head, so.
They do actually call themselves, well, Black Panther is the one who comes up with the Phoenix Five.
Gotcha. So 10 days later, Charles Xavier, for some odd reason, is alive, because I can never keep track of when Charles is alive or dead.
And not only is he alive, but he's walking.
Yeah, so there's that. He goes back to Utopia, and it is exactly that. It is the Utopia that everyone has dreamed for from mutant kind from day one. And it's beautiful. And Eric and Charles have a very bonding moment. Yes, I know that there's some relationship tension there in the Marvel movies, but we're not going to go there. But there is this kind of father-son dynamic between Charles and Cyclops. Cyclops now has all this power. He's now able to use psychic abilities, Cyclops. And there's kind of like, I didn't really want it this way. I'm happy that it's happening, but there was no cost.
This isn't the way that I taught you.
Yeah.
And at this point, I saw Magneto as trying to step in and really actually succeeding as stepping in as the father figure for Cyclops.
Mm-hmm.
because at this point, Cyclops is actually starting to become that megalomaniacal despot.
Mm-hmm.
He's starting to become Magneto.
Yeah.
Back when Magneto first was the adversary of the X-Men.
Welcome, mutants, to die.
Exactly.
So we get some good dialogue between Charles and Cyclops, and it's mostly Cyclops like, listen, these are the things that we're doing. In Africa, they are making storms and raising crops. In Tamir Peninsula, they're creating crops to eat. They're making potable water from the ocean water with Namor's help. In the Gobi Desert, Emma Frost is making some sort of nuclear-powered energy source that's coming for free, and all of the mutants are living in peace. They have a shot where they're playing golf and they're playing soccer, and everyone's so happy in Utopia, and it's great. We cut to Captain America. Captain America is getting a report from Danny Rand, Iron Fist, and goes, we got attacked. We were at an AIM base, and we were attacked by the Zizaks, a living legion of electricity people. And Colossus came, and he just sat down and talked to him.
And Captain America at this point says, well, what did he say? And Danny Rand says, I don't know. I don't speak electricity.
But Colossus clearly does now.
Exactly.
Like, this is just so cool. And like now he talks them into going and being a source of energy for all of Europe. What?
For free.
For free. Yeah. There's just, you have energy you need to give off. That's your curse. Help us help the world.
Right. So at this point in time, the Avengers clearly are well, I shouldn't say clearly, but in my opinion at this point, the Avengers had become the bad guys.
Oh, totally.
Because the X-Men actually have said, okay, you know what? We set out to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
With the Phoenix Force, we have made the world a better place.
Yeah.
People are not fighting. People have enough food. People have enough energy. People have enough water.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's comfortable. But again, it comes back to, yes, but what's the cost?
Yeah. And I remember I was reading this and I was like I said, saw the costumes, saw this was really cool. I'm back on Team X-Men. I felt like with the fact that it was split in 5 people, there is a chance that this is going to do some really great things. This is going to do, maybe the evil Dark Phoenix Force will not be as strong if it's split against these 5 most powerful mutants in the Uncanny Team.
And they all vary on the moral spectrum really good, you know. You've got Colossus, who he's he's always been the lawful good. And then you've got Magic and Emma Frost, who are more of like, not necessarily chaotic evil, but
she's chaotic something.
Yeah.
So we see Cyclops and Hope have a moment. And he says, you turned this down. You have only yourself to blame at this point.
When it came time, you flinched.
Ugh, heartbreaking. Because Cyclops is her father, right? Like, multi-dimensional. I get it. Like, yeah. It's hard to point down.
Yeah, so he's kind of her father. His son Cable is her father figure. So, yeah, it's...
Fucking X-Men.
Right.
And I'm much more pro X-Men. Like, I'll read X-Men comics over Avengers comics usually, because, like, I feel like the X-Men really have they've just got something better in my mind than most Avengers comics.
For me, the X-Men always had more emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, it's like the original Star Wars trilogy versus the prequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
During the Star Wars original trilogy, George Lucas had people to temper him, saying, okay, yes, you have the spectacle, but you also need the character development. It can't be all about the spectacle, which is X-Men. It's more about character development. It's more about the emotions. Whereas I feel that the Avengers are kind of the prequel series.
I love lightsabers, and I love fighting things, and I love history. Let's get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had nobody to temper him at that point, so he just pretty much said, okay, CGI.
Misa, huge mistake. So the X-Men, they're doing some great things. We cut to Kunlun, which I thought was a very interesting choice for everybody to kind of go to. And we find out that the Thunderer, who's the protector of Kunlun at this point, is like, how do we handle this? And he goes to the history books and he finds out that an Iron Fist once punched the Phoenix away.
Exactly. Seeing that, I mean, it's just holy crap. And if you read into it, you can actually see that when the Phoenix is around, Danny says that his fists are burning.
Oh, yeah.
But he hasn't felt them burn like this before.
Never. And so, like, they've been hinting at it, like, since before the moon.
Yes.
I think since round 2. And you're like, oh, man, what's going to happen with that? Like,
what's up with Iron Fist?
Yeah. And, like, Iron Fist isn't really a huge character, even back then in the comics. Like, yeah, he's got the Heroes for Hire, and he's got a few one-shots here and there, a few small arcs.
But they don't usually last more than 13 issues.
Yeah. So, like, how are they going to make Iron Fist this pivotal character? Turns out they really don't. Kinda?
Yeah, it's a huge misdirection.
Yeah.
Which, I got to give props to all of the authors because I love a story that has good misdirection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, any story that I can sit there and think, okay, yep, I know what's going to happen here. 20 minutes into the movie, and then an hour and a half later, I'm like, yep, see, told you that was going to happen.
Yeah. You can't predict some of the things that are going to happen in this story arc, and I love that. To continue on, the Phoenix 5 comes to the UN and says, hey, stop making weapons. You can make things new, make things great. Let us be your police force now, and we will stop everything bad from happening, or else.
And it was at this point that Cyclops really shows his hand at how far of a despot he actually is becoming by making himself the de facto leader of the world, saying Pax Utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that, I was like, oh, crap. Maybe this is going to his head.
Yeah.
Maybe this is going to all 5 of their heads.
We then get a vision of the original Avengers in their original costume. Janet Van Dyne's there, Hank Pym, Thor is there with his stupid-looking helmet, and they are burned alive by the Phoenix.
Don't forget Iron Man in his old, clunky, crappy gold armor.
Oh yeah, that's right. The more chrome dome kind of look instead of Mach 1 suit.
Yeah, the antenna on the shoulder.
Oh gosh, yeah. They are eaten alive, burned to death, and we get the first look at Wanda since issue 0, where she goes, "This is what comes next." Some good fucking shit there.
Yeah, I mean, you have another character who has been both an X-Men and an Avenger coming out and being thrown into the mix. You're like, okay, which side is she going to pick?
Yeah. And, like, she's so riddled with guilt and shame of what she did, she's just kept herself separated from it all for a good reason.
And she still has so much fear of her power because she does have the ability to alter reality.
Mm-hmm.
She is essentially a walking Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah. Oh, what I'd pay to see that fight.
Right.
So then the Avengers decide, okay, we've already kind of lost. We need to regain some of our losses. Let's break into Utopia. Stupid fucking idea. Break into Utopia and kidnap Hope while all of them are there. Small window, let's get in, let's get out. They go in, and of course, Cyclops and Emma Frost are there, and they say, no, you're not going to take her. Wanda appears, and she's like, no, we're taking her with us. This is how it's going to be. Very calm. The fighting stops. She's leaving with me. And Cyclops reaches out, grabs her. Ow! That hurts.
And
Ooh.
At this point, all you see is just a flash of Scarlet, and you see a look of fear on Cyclops' face.
Yeah.
He's thinking, oh, no, they have a secret weapon.
They have a power. They have a weapon that they can use. So then they start, let's bunker down on the Avengers. The Avengers, let's hold down their sights. They can't come in, they can't come out. We want Wanda off the field. And the Avengers quickly recognize Wanda is our best bet. So Tony's trying to figure out, okay, what's the connection? What's the science? How do I get behind this? Magic and Wanda go at it. Oh my gosh, what a show. Talons and beams of purple light going everywhere, and Magic says, ow. Like, oh my gosh, Emma Frost comes in, they pick everything up, and they book it out of there, and and it's just not enough for Iron Man. But Emma Frost gets shot by an arrow with Clint and goes, how dare you? Ignites him on fire. Cyclops goes, we're better than this, and they take Hawkeye with them, and they run away back to Utopia.
And it's very reminiscent of Hope setting Wolverine on fire.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh my gosh, Hawkeye doesn't have the healing factor that Wolverine does. Hawkeye is dead.
Mm-hmm.
But then come to find out, back at Utopia, they actually have Clint, and they say flat out that he is alive.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you, we are going to use our abilities to heal Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we do.
And at this point, this is a good point to point out that Namor is still king. He's still a king, and he's still very used to ruling. Now he has so much more power to do the ruling. And some of his own team, some of the X-Men, have been captured by the Avengers. And so he's like, we need to go back for our people. He goes, and Cyclops is trying to have that balance of despot and fair ruler. Of like, no, if we do that, we're acting on war. This was just pressure, not war.
Right.
And Namor storms off, right? Meanwhile, this is a pivotal moment that I really like. Tony is working on some things to try and figure out how do they stop this. And T'Challa is there in the original outfit with the mini cape, and it looks more like clothing than it does the vibranium suit in the movies. I love the look.
Right.
And like T'Challa looks over his figures and goes, this looks like a suicide run. Who's supposed to run this? And he goes, me, because I fucked up.
And there's only 13% chance that I'll actually live through this.
Yeah. And so what does T'Challa do? Fucking slaps the guy! Oh my gosh!
I wrote that same thing. I was like, not surprising, nihilistic Tony Stark. T'Challa literally smacking sense into him.
Oh my gosh. And it's so like, oh yes. Oh yeah. And like, because it's always questionable who's smarter, T'Challa or Tony. And in this moment, it's like, clearly it's T'Challa.
Oh yeah.
He's just smack. It's science is failing us, and you're concerned with writing your own ending that is an unacceptable as your precious little 13%. Whoa.
And, going back to Versus, it's at this point where T'Challa has already fought Storm, because Storm was in Wakanda helping look for Hope.
Yeah.
During the fight, you find out that Black Panther actually is like the cool Christian Bale Batman because he actually has a plan to take down Storm.
His wife.
He flat out tells his computing system, execute plan for Mutant X-83. And he literally has this satellite dry up the clouds with this dust. He has another satellite basically release these phytoplankton to drain the heat from the air, and literally just cuts her down to nothing more than a cooling breeze.
Yeah.
And this is the part where you actually see how much of a toll this whole thing is taking on T'Challa and Storm. Because they're fighting. She shoots him with a lightning bolt. She says, oh, well, he's probably grounded himself. He probably doesn't feel it. And he says, that hurt like hell. But it wasn't the lightning that hurt. It was the fact that it was my wife.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the fight winds up devolving into T'Challa's mask getting ripped. So he pulls the whole mask off. And they say, okay, this is where it ends. And they come together and they've got their fists raised. And the next thing you see is them kissing each other.
Oh.
They run to each other, clasp each other in each other's arms, kiss each other, and then the next panel, they punch each other in the face.
Oh, my heart. I wasn't prepared for this. Oh, gosh. Oh.
And it winds up boiling down to where the people of Wakanda actually come out and they're looking at her and they say, Queen Aurora, what are you doing? And then one of the villagers says, somebody, please, Panther gods, help our king. And she looks down and she's got her wedding ring on and it's just a full panel of nothing but her ring. And then she says, he actually tells her, the high priest of the Panther God has annulled
Our marriage.
And she says, but you're the high priest. And he says, yes. And the last panel you see as Storm is flying away is it's her ring again, but it's in the sand.
Oh, baby, no. Oh, gosh. My heart.
So you see just what kind of emotional turmoil T'Challa is going through, and yet he is still not nihilistic.
Yeah.
Tony Stark has that ego where, oh man, I failed once. I'm going to hit the bottle again.
Yeah. I'm going to sacrifice my life. But no, I'm king of I am the king of Wakanda. I am an Avenger, and I am a human being. These all things need to balance out.
Right.
And it's at this point that he says, I have the most technologically advanced city in the world under my fist, and I chew on roots to speak to my ancestors. It's time to not think about just the science anymore. And that starts Tony down a new path for the remaining arc.
But he's very, very opposed to going down this path.
Totally, yeah.
He's just, I'm a man of science. I don't believe in magic. And in the next panel, you see Doctor Strange. Mm-hmm. It's like, Tony, there's proof right there that magic works.
Yeah.
Science works as well. Doctor Strange and T'Challa, both very clear-cut scientific magic people.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep throwing them under the bus by saying, I don't think it'll work.
Nah, of course not. Can't work. Can't work at all. So Namor goes to Wakanda and incites war on the people, floods the city, and has the Atlanteans be his Minutemen, essentially. And it's a gut-wrenching battle, but it's a battle where the Avengers kind of win, in a sense.
Right.
They walk away with defeating Namor. Takes all of their power and Wanda, but they do it, and they don't win. When they win, they lose.
Right. I mean, they flat out say that it took absolutely everything that they had to take down one of these guys. Mm-hmm. And what happens when Namor gets taken down?
Phoenix leaves him and goes into the Force. So now it's not split 5 ways. It's now split 4 ways. So the remaining 4 are that much stronger. Ugh.
It's one of those things that just makes you think, oh, crap. Okay, the Avengers have just made things exponentially more difficult for themselves. Mm-hmm. And they all have come to that decision too, where they're starting to lose hope. I mean, they say, okay, well, these guys are stronger now, and it took everything we had. We've got nothing else. What do we do?
Yeah. So that makes it really, just weigh on everybody. And at this point, it's good to know that a lot of the X-Men are changing sides, because it's no longer about bringing the mutants back and making peace for the world. Cyclops still thinks that's what he's doing, but the actions are very different. So we see that X-Men are starting to join the Avengers and asking for sanctuary. Meanwhile, we have the Avengers, who are in round 9 now, and it starts out with Spider-Man getting the crap beat out of him. And he goes, whose blood is this? Oh, it's mine.
And at this point, you don't even know it's Spider-Man.
Oh,
all
true.
You see is you just see these panels of his perspective, and the word texts are covered in blood. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's enough blood that it's almost hard to decipher what he's saying. Mm-hmm. You have to really sit there and scrutinize.
Yeah. And Spider-Man's always going to be he's the baby, right? He's always going to be the one that you want to protect. He's always going to be the one that you want to make sure is safe, right? No matter what stage in Spider-Man's career you are, you want to take care of Spider-Man.
Everybody always sees him as the teenager he started out as, mm-hmm. not the man that he has grown into becoming.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking. So kind of flashes back. Hope is training in Kunlun We kind of glossed over that pretty quick because they just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, that's one, it's a safe place to be, and two, if that's another option we can take, let's take it. So Spider-Man's training with Hope. She's balancing waters of buckets on pointy things to stand on, and he basically says, listen, when you're an Avenger, you just kind of go with the flow and you follow whoever thinks that they're most in charge or they're most used to this. And you're going to know when your moment's going to come up. And that's going to be you. You're going to have that moment and you're not going to have to worry about it at all.
Right, because he's saying that there are times for each Avenger.
Mm-hmm.
And not every Avenger is going to be used all the time.
Yeah.
But they're on the team for a very clear reason.
Mm-hmm. While he's having this conversation with Hope, Cyclops and Emma Frost are having a conversation in Ethiopia, the Danakil Desert, the hottest place on Earth. She's like, why are we meeting here? She goes, well, it's the farthest away from any human mind. It's where I can have a peace of mind. And they talk about how they're stronger because of Namor and the implications of that. And and being a little bit more powerful, she's able to reach their minds while they're in Kunlun and lets them know, like, hey, they're in Kunlun. And as he's leaving, Emma Frost says, Scott, don't go. I'm worried about what I'm going to do next. Don't leave me.
Yeah, she actually ends that by saying, stop me.
Ugh. And that's like the same moment when Jean Grey was like, kill me now.
Right.
Oh.
And in the augmented version of this book, you can actually see Cyclops going to the moon. He goes to the moon for a moment of silence because there are so many minds around him that he's constantly being bombarded with everyone's thoughts. He feels that overwhelming sense of togetherness and proximity.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to the moon by himself. And as he's on the moon, he's walking around just thinking to himself, okay, well, what do we do next? I don't know what to do. And he comes across the blue area of the moon, specifically the area where Jean Grey sacrificed herself.
Mm.
And he looks around and he's thinking, okay, well, why did I come here? I didn't consciously come here, but my subconscious is obviously telling me something.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's walking through the blue area of the moon, he actually comes to the weapon that killed Jean Grey. And he's standing there and he says, I wish I could talk to Jean Grey. I wish I could talk to Jean. And as he's saying that, you see on the ground the dust start to move. And as it's moving, it's starting to form into a human shape.
Oh my gosh.
And he forms Jean Grey. And he starts talking to this literal ghost of Jean Grey that he himself has created.
Oh my gosh. I've never read this.
Like I say, it's in the augmented reality version of this.
Yeah.
So if your comic has the AR on the front of it, download the Marvel app. You can look at that. You can read it.
Yeah.
And you start to realize at this point that it's not Jean Grey, because there's no possible way that it could be Jean Grey. What it is it's Cyclops talking to himself, justifying his own actions. The true despot action. He's saying to himself, well, this does need to happen. This is what should happen. But then his own psyche, the ghost of Jean Grey, tells him, you know what needs to happen. And he says, yes, I need to stop talking to ghosts of the past. And Jean disappears. And this was actually the first series that really heavily implemented the AR. Because if you read the AR version, Nova, it delves into his travel from where he initially encounters the Phoenix to actually making it back to Earth. And it's his whole process of he's going so fast, his brain literally can't catch up. He's reliant on the helmet.
Yeah.
But this whole thing with Cyclops talking to the ghost of Jean Grey, which is nothing more than his own mind, is really heart-wrenching and terrifying.
Yeah.
Because when I read that, I was like, oh, Cyclops is insane.
Uh-huh.
Because a sane person doesn't talk to themselves expecting a response.
Yeah.
But Cyclops gets that response.
That's... Oh, gosh. That's just so heavy to me. Like, the idea of Cyclops validating himself like that. You know, you don't see villains validate themselves in specific ways. When we think of Hitler, when we think of Stalin and Mussolini, we see these terrible, awful people that decided one day that they needed to do what they thought was right. But we never get to see that moment where they justify the cost of human life, right? Like,
right. I mean, the whole thing is, he says, it breaks down to Scott telling himself that it is worth the lives of the mutant race to be rid of everything else. So he's choosing the life of one species over another. He is at this point deciding on genocide.
Fuck. Oh. Meanwhile, while all that depressing shit is happening, the Avengers stake out an escape plan to get some of their team back. Alanya Magic has brought a portion of Limbo to Earth in Siberia, and they break into this volcano with all these demons inside of it,
which was cool and terrifying.
I always loved demon stuff. Like, that's my go-to when it comes to it. I love demonology. Like, when it comes to Marvel, I love the fact that, like, it's, hey, this is demons and whatnot, and I always stay away from space. It's demons and angels and shit like that. I love it. And they're fighting, then they're losing. Magic and Colossus are making their way through it and just kicking the crap out of them. And he looks to Iron Fist and he goes, "Tell Hope I was right." And he throws them all out. And he single-handedly distracts them long enough that he makes them forget what they were doing. And he gets the crap beaten out of him.
And it ties back to the beginning of the issue,
where all I see is blood. And Colossus says, "It'd be good to stay down, friend." And he goes,
"Don't make me hit you harder."
Yeah. And he goes, "I'm afraid I can't do that." Yeah. You will whether you want to or not.
It's at this point, too, where reading the other characters' perspectives, you find out that Illyana did bring this piece of Limbo in, but the prisoners that she has been letting these demon worms feed on the minds of the Avengers. So
Magic was never a good candidate for the Phoenix. We knew that from the beginning. And at the same time, like, these are the consequences that we're having to deal with.
Right. You kind of thought that, with Colossus having it too, he might balance her out. But you find out that he's not really doing a whole lot to balance her out.
So Spider-Man's beaten to a pulp. And he says, "After all, you both know what would happen to all that power if one of you was to fall, right? I'm sure neither of you would want that."
And this part...
so good for Spider-Man!
It goes to prove that Spider-Man really is one of the 8 smartest characters in the Marvel Universe.
Totally. He was able to manipulate them on a level where he can't even speak a complete sentence without stopping for breath.
Right, because you've seen him get hit in the face so hard by Colossus, his skull misforms.
Yeah.
While he's on the ground, Colossus is standing on his back. And yet he still has the presence of mind and the morality to say, "Oh, hey, you remember what happened?" And before you see Colossus and Magic down for the count, you just see this explosion coming from this unnatural volcano, and it's shaped like the Phoenix. And everybody's just kind of looking at each other going, "Wait, Spider-Man took down 2 of the Phoenix Force.
Yeah. He literally took half the strength of the Phoenix with words.
Right.
If that's not the epitome of what a bard should be, oh my gosh.
And if that's not the epitome of what the power of words actually are.
This is some good writing here.
Exactly.
Like, I love this so much. And at this point, like, it's no longer about Avengers versus X-Men. Like, it's not, I'm with Team X-Men, I'm with Team Avengers. This is, you have to be Wolverine. You have to be Wolverine in issue 2. I am Team Earth.
Right, because going back to when the X-Men started seeking Sanctuary, the first X-Men to come out seeking Sanctuary was Rogue.
Ugh.
And she's standing in a field talking to what you think is herself.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere comes the Avengers and Professor X. And Professor X just looks at Rogue and says, Rogue, tell the others they won't be harmed.
This is a safe space.
And Cap just kind of looks at Captain America and says, what do you mean the others? And then you just see X-Men popping up out of this field of grass where they were hiding. And you've got characters like Psylocke, who up to this point was heavy follower of Cyclops and the Phoenix 5. You've got people like Iceman, who he was one of the original X-Men. He flat out admits to Professor X, I loved him like a brother. You loved him like a son. But we both know what he's doing is wrong. And going back a little bit too, Emma Frost is so power hungry at this point that she's talking to the other X-Men and she's telling them that they need to bow before her. They need to be on their knees.
Think positive thoughts about me.
Right, because Cannonball starts having thoughts of...
she's a bad person.
Right, and Emma calls him out on it and says, you'd better change your thoughts or I'll change them for you.
And Magneto was like, oh gosh, I wasn't wearing my helmet.
Yeah, you know it's bad when Magneto starts telling you, you guys are going a little bit too far on this.
Yeah.
I built an asteroid in space, initially thinking that someday I was going to crash it down on Homo sapiens, but you guys are going a little far.
This is your own people that you're treating here. Meanwhile, while Emma's doing this, Cyclops attacks Kunlun, and the Thunderer takes Hope to Xiao Lao.
Oh yeah,
the dragon.
That part was one of my favorite parts of this whole series.
And we knew early on that the Iron Fist was strong enough to fight off the Phoenix Force. So we knew that by proxy, the dragon that gives the Iron Fist his powers would be enough to be able to fight back the Phoenix. So we see this awesome green flame hit Cyclops, and it knocks him down, and he goes, oh, that hurt too. Okay, I've got another thing I've got to worry about. The problem is that this Xiao Lao is young. It's not as old as the original.
This Xiao Lao is essentially the magic equivalent of the Phoenix Force, because it's a cycle of death and rebirth. So this Xiao Lao has been reborn, but it's still too young. It's
only a few hundred years old at this point.
Right.
So it doesn't have the strength. And it comes down to a fist fight between the Thunderer, Hope, and Cyclops after Cyclops blows Xiao Lao out of the sky. And they're having some words, and it's time to come home. You're a stupid little girl. You don't know what you're doing. And Hope opens up her mouth, and just green flame shoots out. And she freaks out and goes, I don't know what I did. I'm running away. Bye.
You know, at the beginning of this fight, when Iron Fist was actually in it, he said one of my favorite lines in this entire series as well. To quote him, he says, well, Mussolini made the trains run on time too, Scott. Which is just one of those things where you're like, okay, Iron Fist is calling him out. Iron Fist is saying, no, you're no better than Mussolini or Hitler at this point. Yeah, you're doing what you think is best, but what you think is best isn't the best for everyone else. You find out that he has actually been training Hope alongside the Thunderer. So that's where he comes in, is he's teaching Hope how to use the Iron Fist.
Yeah.
So she has the Iron Fist, and it leads into one of the coolest panels. the Chaos Fist.
The Chaos Fist, first ever usage, where the Dragon Fist, the Iron Fist, and the Chaos Hex magic of Wanda Maximoff combined into the most powerful mutant on the face of this planet right now, Hope Summers, and punches Cyclops in the throat.
Right.
And he loses his powers for like a good 10 minutes.
And then Scarlet Witch comes to him and says, "Go away." And he disappears.
One of the coolest pieces. And we're nearing the end at this point. We're in round 11, where this ends, and like they're still asking the question, whose side are you with? Like that's the fun cover art piece. But like the people who are reading the comics are like, there is no sides,
right?
There's no sides.
There are two sides. There is the Axis. No. Sorry. Phoenix 5.
Oh, yep, okay.
And then there's everybody else.
Yeah. So the Avengers are reaching out to everybody they can. They even get the original Hulk, who's been in the Colorados and the Utahs, hiding out. And Hulk says, "Hulk smash for you."
I loved that speech that Captain America gives. And at first, you don't see him talking to anyone.
Yeah.
He's just talking to what looks like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Saying, "Hey, I know that you don't fight unless you think it's a good cause, but will you please fight for us because we're down to our last?
I know you only fight a fight worth fighting. And I'm telling you, this is one of those fights. If we lose this, we lose everything. Will you please help us?" "Yes, Hulk, we'll smash for you." Fuck. It's so good. This is so good.
It just goes to prove that when you have all of these awesome authors working on the same book and they're working well together,
mm-hmm.
their writing is just so phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
The scripting, everything. You read it and every single panel just gets better and better.
Totally. 100%. Honestly, I felt like the first 3 dragged
for
this. And you're like, I get it. Yes. Okay. We've got the balance and we've got the X-Men and all this junk. And we're just going to yada through it. So that way I want to get through to the exciting stuff. And then starts after Cap asking for as much help as he can. And Cyclops and Emma Frost are having a conversation. Because it's now just the two of them. 50-50 the Phoenix Force. And they're kind of having this conversation of like, you want to kill me. No, you want to kill me. You want the power. No, you want the power. So they're kind of trying to call each other's bluff. And then Scott's like, wait a minute, something else is here. And he walks out and Xavier's there. He's been here a little bit, right? Like he's hanging out. He's been like, hey, this isn't how I raised you. We didn't earn this. And this is like, if I could just stop and read this entire scene to you guys, I would read every word of it. But it's just so good. He goes, I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm here to help you. And he goes, I told you, I'm not arguing with you. I'm shutting you down, Scott. And he goes, you don't have the power. I do, Scott. The thing is you don't recognize that we're already mid-fight.
We're already in your mind.
And you're losing. And then you go to the next panel, and you see Charles standing there calmly, while Cyclops is on his knees, bound by the chains of Sidorak with Doctor Strange behind him, and just chaos behind them.
Yeah, it slowly starts to fade out, and you see the Avengers versus Emma Frost. Because there aren't any X-Men left. It's not only the Avengers, it's the Avengers and the X-Men versus Emma Frost while Scott is on his knees.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, just some of the dialogue, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to fight. I'm here to help. Admit it. You need it. And this will all go in. And Cyclops, the ego on you. I finally put the world it's supposed to be. I did it. Me. And you can't be proud of me. This guy's got daddy issues.
Oh, yeah.
and
reading this whole thing, I kept coming back. I've got multiple notes stating that the Phoenix 5 really have the mentality of abusers.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because they keep saying over and over again, you bring this on yourself. You brought this on yourself. And anytime somebody questions their power or starts to supersede that power, they abuse the crap out of people, both either physically or emotionally.
Yeah. So it's a tough fight, and everybody's trying to do their best to try and fight back Emma Frost. And it's just not working. Cap America is trying to keep them off their game long enough for Cyclops to be calmed down by Xavier.
During the Versus, this actually had one of the coolest fights. It was Thor versus Emma Frost.
Oh.
And Thor comes at Emma Frost and he's fighting, and she's, of course, half of the Phoenix Force. And she decides she's going to use her psychic powers to shut him down. But she has never read the mind of a god. And she starts trying to read his mind, and it causes her overwhelming pain because it's just so vast.
Yeah.
And she keeps taunting him with things like, I don't see women who with that much hair take half as much time as you do to do your hair. And she says, you know what? I know that men like you like having women like me dominate you. I even have some pretty things that I could have you wear. And you're just like,
oh gosh.
Okay, that's a little too BDSM for me. But
I'm interested.
I mean, it comes to a point where Thor actually hits Emma Frost. Emma has turned diamond form.
Yeah.
As the Phoenix. She feels nothing. Emotionally or physically, she feels nothing. And Thor hits her with Mjolnir and shatters her. But the pieces shoot up and come shooting back down.
Oh, this is some Terminator shit. Okay.
It is, because she does the T-1000 thing. She reforms her body and hits Thor and takes him down.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I need to read the verses.
It was so cool. But at the same time, I'm like, but come on, Thor, you're the thunder god. I mean, she gets hit with a lightning bolt, and she says, as she's walking away, I expected a little more thunder from a big guy like you.
Oh man. And these are like answering those questions, who would win in a fight?
Oh, yeah.
And like, this is getting... Stanley always says, who would win in a fight? It depends on who writes it.
Exactly.
Right? And like, you've got 5 great writers writing like, well, unanimously, it's gonna be this person.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be the brains over the brawn sometimes. It's going to be the might versus the wit. And, oh man, that's so good. I'm going to have to read the verses. Back to Cyclops and Xavier, Cyclops is being bound down mentally and physically, and he bursts into flames at one point, screaming, "Enough!" And Charles says, "Sit down, boy!" And you're like, "Oh, Dad! oh, I've made Dad upset. Oh gosh!"
Well, right, but he literally is Cyclops' adoptive father.
Yeah,
because of course Dad wasn't there. Dad was in space, running around with space pirates.
Yeah, and like. Of course, no, like, yeah, well, it is what it is. Okay. And Cyclops just leans into this so much, and he just wants him to be proud. Do you think that, like, had Xavier said at the very beginning, like, when he first met Phoenix Scott, and said, "I'm really proud of what you've done. I don't agree with the way that you've done it, but I'm proud." Do you think that would have, like, mitigated a whole lot?
Having stated in the previous podcast that I have daddy issues as well.
Join the club.
Yeah. The one time my dad told me he was proud of me was my wedding day, and I nearly broke. I'm like, oh man, okay. And after that, it was the turning point for my relationship with my dad. If Professor X had just come out and said, "Scott, you know what? I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm proud of what you're trying to do, but you're going about it the wrong way," I think that would have avoided the situation that came up too.
Yeah, because that's all that Scott is he's vying for a father's attention and affection, right? Like,
right.
the idea that this man is just, he's running on fumes emotionally, and he just wants to do what he thinks is right. So if Cyclops had sat him down and just said, I love you, you're an idiot, but I love you.
Right.
I think he would have been able to reach out to human Scott
instead of Phoenix
and
Scott.
feeding the flames, so to speak.
Right. Because earlier in the series, it actually does state that they feel that the Phoenix amplifies the person.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was during the scene with the Jean Grey ghost. Jean Grey actually says, the Phoenix always makes you bigger than you are. So it of course makes Emma Frost way more of a mistress.
Yeah.
It makes Peter that much more benevolent because he could have just punched the Zizaks.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He sat down and spoke to him.
Yeah.
It made Ileana pushed that much further towards the limbo side. And I think that it actually amplified Cyclops' daddy issues.
Oof.
Yeah. As if daddy issues weren't bad enough by themselves.
You had to amplify them with the power of life and death.
Exactly.
So this all culminates into Cyclops doesn't feel like he has enough powers, takes the powers from Emma Frost, and then uses them to kill his father figure. Which
the first time I read messed me up.
One, this is kind of one of my major problems with comic books. Who's dead for long?
Right.
We used to have the Trinity. You don't bring back Uncle Ben, you don't bring back Jason Todd, and you don't bring back Barry Allen. Hooray! We now have the unity. We just have the one.
Right.
We just have Uncle Ben, who's not coming back, right?
Hopefully.
We can only pray. At least MCU didn't bring him back. He kills the father, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, he's died how many times beforehand? It's like some clone is going to come about, or he's moved his mind in just the right time.
I mean, it even boils down to it's happened in the movies.
Yeah.
Where Phoenix, of course, rips him apart. But then at the end, hey, look, the coma patient has Professor X's voice in his head.
Yeah. And I have such a hard time with this. I get the impact. And when I read it the first time, it was really fucking good. This felt heavy, this felt concrete, and it felt real in the pain that all the characters were feeling. To the point where Hulk fastball specials Wolverine, and Wolverine doesn't even make it within 5 feet. He's disintegrated into nothing.
When he falls, it's literally just his skeleton with his eyeballs.
Yeah. And we feel that. But the moment that you shut this issue, the moment that you go on to issue number 12, Charles isn't going to be dead for long.
Right.
Or at least if he is, it's going to be, some pivotal moment that we didn't expect coming. And it's like, oh, well, Cyclops is back, turning into a Deus Ex Machina.
I will say there actually is one Marvel character that has stayed dead since the 80s.
Who?
Captain Marvel. The original Captain Marvel, who died of cancer.
That's right, because he didn't technically come back. He was Kree the entire time.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so he is one of those characters that thankfully has stayed dead. But you've got a character as important as Charles Xavier to the whole mythos of X-Men. Mm-hmm. He's not going to stay dead for long.
Yeah. Cyclops
has died. Wolverine has died, but now they're on the hunt for Wolverine. Which I appreciate what Marvel tried to do with making all of these mantles pass on. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, now they've got the legacy coming out, which is all of these old characters coming back to retake their mantles.
And it was so good with Riri Williams as Ironheart.
Right.
And Jane Foster as Thor. And
Amadeus Cho as the totally awesome Hulk.
Yeah. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur instead of Moon Boy.
Right.
So it comes back to Marvel needs to make the money. Marvel knows the characters and it's scary to throw in new characters. And Marvel, if you look at this at a business standpoint, Marvel's not going to make new X-Men until this merger comes through. Right? Like, we're not going to see new X-Men be made. A lot of people believe that the House of M was because they didn't want to give more mutants to Fox.
Right.
And that's why they leaned so heavily into the Inhumans for the past 10 years, is that they just feel that if we can make other characters that we already have more beneficial, that we still have rights to, we can just kind of put X-Men on the back burner for a while. So I don't think that anybody's going to create something new until this merger's complete, until Marvel is whole again.
Right.
And that scares me, because it's possible that this merger doesn't go through, right?
Exactly, because you had the whole Comcast bid, which Disney, again, had to outbid. And there's only a finite amount of times where you can say, oh, yeah, I'll up this bid. Crap, we're running out of money.
Oh, it's Disney. They're not going to run out of money anytime soon.
Right, with Star Wars and
If you think about the amount of money that they make in movies in a year, the initial bid was $52.6 billion for Fox.
Right.
And they make that easy. Like, that may not be their movie budget, but that's clearly money that the whole company and all of its holdings, ESPN, Disneyland, and the parks, comics now. ABC. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot ABC. All of these other things, that's chump change to the Disney Corporation.
Right.
So I don't think that there's going to be any concern of Disney not buying out Fox.
Right.
And I think that there's enough higher ups that recognize the potential. We can have Fox and Marvel back together. It's all going to be good. I think that there's too much on stake for them to not continuing upping the ante.
And, bringing that up, the only times you ever see New Mutants were when Wolverine and Cyclops actually split their schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they both started seeking new members.
Yeah.
I mean, you have one of my favorite characters from Wolverine and the X-Men, Kid Omega.
Oh, yeah.
Who he actually is mentioned in the book in this when Wolverine comes to Hope and he says, well, how did you buy beer?
Yeah.
Oh, Kid Omega is actually making some really convincing fake IDs.
And out of your school.
Yeah. And he goes, man, that boy's going to be the death of me. But then you've also got characters like Armor.
Oh, yeah.
She had that mini series with Wolverine, which was really interesting.
Alpha and Omega?
Yeah.
That was really good. I liked that one.
But that's the only times that you've seen New Mutants since that time.
Since the House of M, yeah.
And they're still considered one of the 198. So they only had 198 characters that could have been established. And then you get characters like Beak.
Yeah.
Who, I felt bad for the kid, but at the same time, I'm like,
he's just a Birdman. That's all that he is.
And not even a cool Birdman.
He just has a beak and feathery skin.
And he's got the weird bird feet.
So clearly, what X-Men they are making, because Negasonic Teenage Warhead, she was a new creation, right? She was created in 2003, 2006?
Right. She was created in about 2006, but the Deadpool version that we saw was not the comic book version.
It was very different. But my point being is that Marvel said, hey, we want that. And it ended up being a betting game. So they got Ego the Living Planet for a few other things, right? And Negasonic was part of that. So if we make the cool mutants like Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her very dark and tragic and very just upsetting past, it's stuff that I don't even really want to dabble with too much.
Right.
Then Fox is going to try and take it. So, of course, we're going to make the shitty X-Men now until we can confidently make them cool again.
Let's admit, Glob is terrible.
Oh, he's just a see-through human being.
Right. He's a huge see-through human being, but that's it. I mean, they do have one new X-Men character that I actually do like, and that's Dupe.
Oh yeah, Dupe, the alien green jelly bean thing that doesn't speak English.
Yeah, who speaks in these weird
wingdings
symbols. Yeah. But I do think that you're right. I do think that we don't have these New Mutants because the whole Fox Disney rivalry, but now that they're going to merge, hopefully things happen. Because going back to issue 12, you have the Avengers and the X-Men all fighting what Scott has become. He has become what he initially set out not to become.
Yeah.
He has become the Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
This whole fight was just astronomically cool to me.
It was so cool.
Like watching Cyclops punch Hulk in Sydney and then seeing Hulk land in Sacramento. Seeing Cyclops punch Thor in Tibet and then seeing Thor in space 2,000 miles above the Earth. It was just so cool. And during this whole time, you've got Iron Man and you've got Beast working on a solution. Again, this is part of the AR, because what they do is they take Scarlet Witch aside and they say, okay, your abilities this whole time have been able to hurt Cyclops and the Phoenix Five.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this halo on your head and I'm going to have you turn your hex powers inward. And this halo will show us all of the probabilities. And here's a list of the most likely probabilities. Let's see what those most likely probabilities are.
Yeah.
You've got you've got Captain America versus Cyclops.
Yeah.
You've got Thor versus Cyclops. And then you've got Wolverine versus Cyclops. And you watch all three of these play out. All three of them end in defeat. And Hank McCoy comes in and says, you know what? There's just no hope. And then you see a word bubble say, did somebody say my name? And she peeks her head in, and it's hope. Tony just goes, what do you mean? And she says, well, you know, you guys always seem to forget that I'm here, and I just like to let you guys know I'm still here. And then Scarlet Witch has this epiphany, and she plugs hope into the system. And instead of being a picture of Cyclops standing above the bodies of Captain America, Thor, and Wolverine, it starts to fade and pixelate. And the body on the floor starts to fade and pixelate. And then they re-solidify, and it's hope over Phoenix Cyclops.
Oh, shit. That makes it like so much more interesting. I need to look at the AR now. I never had it really work for me before, because you're like supposed to hold it above the page and whatnot. And I never had it work really well.
Right.
I think I had it work for Deadpool once, but that's neither here nor there. So we're on the last issue now. Dark Phoenix Cyclops is the thing, and everyone's very much like, hey, this is our Hail Mary, and it's gotta be Scarlet Witch and it's gotta be Hope. They're the only ones who can do this. And it kind of goes to this flashback, and it feels kind of pointless in my mind, this flashback. But then it goes into Hope and Wanda fighting Scott. And it is so cool. It's mystical, it's power, and it's magic, and it's everything that we could ever really want to. And Captain America says they're doing what they can, but we need to help. And we've seen them time and time again lose. But now that these two pieces are on the field together, now there's a chance.
They're causing enough of a distraction that the Avengers can actually help by furthering said distraction.
And this is the one moment that Scott has his human moment, like Jean Grey. And he says, please kill me before it's... And then he comes back. And angry and rage and hotter than ever. And we see Scott. It's time to stop. What? Jean, is that you? And it looks like it's the silhouette of Jean Grey walking to him in his Phoenix-fueled rage. And then the next thing that we see is Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch punching the shit out of Scott Cyclops together. And oh my gosh, it is so cool.
It is. I mean, they hit him so hard that they knock the Phoenix out of him.
That's like knocking you into next Tuesday, right?
Right.
Like that's the proverbial knock you into next week.
Or Tuesday 5 years from now.
Yeah. Knock you back into the MCU kind of punch.
Right.
So the Phoenix leaves and jumps into Hope, and Hope starts fixing things, starts fixing all the problems that the fires, the earthquakes, everything.
Right, because as soon as she actually gets the Phoenix Force back, she just takes off.
Yeah.
And Iron Man takes off after her, and he's barely able to keep pace.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain America says, "What's going on?" And Iron Man says, "Oh my God, she's putting out all of the fires, literal and figurative.
Mm-hmm.
She's fixing everything."
Yeah.
And then when she finally comes back, she is the White Phoenix.
So cool. And she's like, I am the Phoenix. I see where they failed. I'll fix this. And Scarlet Witch says, no, you don't need to fix this. You were right that I am the reason that we're here at all in the first place, because I said no more mutants. And that's what inspired Cyclops to do this thing.
And that's what actually gained the attention of the Phoenix Force.
And we can fix this together. So the White Phoenix and Scarlet Witch, hand in hand,
say no more Phoenix.
And it's lightning and fire shoot across the world as the Phoenix Force leaves Hope, and it brings back mutants.
That first scene I thought was so cool and so inspiring. You've got Spider-Man in Tokyo trying to save this bus that's fallen off of a bridge, and he's reaching for this girl inside of the bus. And then all of a sudden Spider-Man just says, guys, this girl just sprouted wings. Does that mean we won or we lost?
What's going on here?
Right.
So that's kind of the pivotal moment. You know, there's consequences. Scott is in prison. The rest of the Phoenix Force is on the run.
Magneto is back to being a war criminal.
No, back to being a war criminal, which in my mind, as it should be.
Right.
As good as he is as a teacher, he's better as a criminal.
Exactly.
Right. And Cyclops feels bad. He owns up to it. He says, this was all my fault. Wolverine's like, I've got a eulogy to give.
And Captain America tells Cyclops, don't you dare turn this into a win.
Yeah.
Because what you did was not winning.
Yeah.
What you did was cheating, and it was despicable.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Scarlet Witch talking to Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, oh, what's this? And this is a new Avengers program, right? And she says, yeah, but we're going for something a little more uncanny.
Ha-cha-cha!
Right.
And that starts, that kind of has that aftermath, the Uncanny Avengers. So it's some Avengers with some mutants, some X-Men.
Right.
And that was a cool arc. I read a little bit of that, and that was good.
I like the second volume more because,
I'll have to pick it up.
Deadpool
becomes
a member of the Uncanny Avengers.
Well, then, of course, now I have to read it. So, with all this being said and done, mutants are somewhat back. Like, I don't feel like they really came back in a sense in the Marvel universe here. Like, we didn't see new X-Men jump up.
Right.
We stuck with 198. Maybe a few additions here and there. Generation Hope was kind of good. She went around calming down other mutants to start joining the side. So now there's like 210. Cool. What's the point? Like, what are we walking out of this with? In the book club format, what's the lesson to be learned that Hickman and Bendis and Faction all wanted to tell us in this moment?
Well, I know that back in 2013, just like now, there was a lot of racial tension.
Mm.
It was especially because we had Obama in office, a black man as the president.
Yeah. Second term just beginning.
Right. So what I feel this is coming down to is them saying that we are better together than we are separate.
Mm.
Because you saw once the X-Men joined the Avengers, once Hope joined the Scarlet Witch, they were able to actually defeat the Phoenix and restart all of mutant kind.
Mm-hmm.
So what Cyclops actually wanted happened because they came together. But what the Avengers actually wanted also came about because they came together.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got two completely different groups. And then, of course, you have the offshoots, the Uncanny Avengers, where Havoc is actually the leader of the Avengers. It really was just one of those things that I boiled it down to equality. I mean,
the main message of X-Men since the beginning of time, essentially.
Right.
It's treat people as you should treat them. Like, they're people. They're not monsters. They're not aliens. They were born on this planet. Whether they were born in Kenya or not, they were born on this planet, and we need to be able to recognize, if I cut you, you will bleed the same blood that I will bleed.
Right. And then I also feel that it's a story of compromise, because in the end, they both got what they wanted. The Earth wasn't destroyed.
Yeah.
Mutant kind is back, but it was only through compromising and working together that was able to come about.
The death of the Phoenix. Yeah, right. The Phoenix, something had to die.
Right.
Charles had to die.
Exactly.
Well, that's heavy stuff. And we have talked in your ears for quite some time. We hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have. If you want to tell us what you think Avengers Versus X-Men is boiling down to, let us know on Twitter at Comic Trades Pod. We'll be happy to hear you. We'll chat back with you and see what you guys think. We will not be having another long hiatus. We are still following our once a month format. What's going to be our next book, Dane?
Well, discussing it today, we have finally come to a conclusion of why The Last Man.
But why? We will begin reading that. We want you to read it with us. Send us your thoughts in the coming month. We will let you know when the next episode's coming out. And just like today, we will go through, read it, tell you what we think. We want to hear what you guys think. We would love to have you sit at the table with us. Any closing thoughts?
Only thing I've got for closing is I finally have a Twitter.
Oh, you have a Twitter? Plug your Twitter, man.
I am at Comic Nerd Dad.
All
one word.
Perfect. Perfect. I think I am officially following you. If not, I'm following you now. Perfect. Okay, so let us know what you think at Comic Nerd Dad, at Comic Trades Pod. I want to hear your thoughts. Tell us what you think about Why the Last Man, what you thought of Avengers Versus X-Men. Tell us what you think we should be reading next. We would love to hear your guys' thoughts.
We are entirely okay with stepping away from superheroes.
Yeah, I want to get away from Marvel for a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, this was a little heavy for Marvel.
So much Marvel. All right, you guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having us at your table. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.